Hello, please get the text of problem 26 of chapter 1. I handed out the text of the problem in class, and what I'd like you to do is look at the problem. This problem is one where a company named Anderson acquires first 10% of another company, Behringer, using it as an available for sale security on January 1st, 2011. They pay $92,000. A year later, they buy another 20%, which gives them the ability to influence Behringer. This would mean one would go from the fair value method to the equity method after 1 year. Behringer has a book value of $800,000 on January 1st, 2011. That would mean that Anderson paid $92,000 for 10%, and on that day, Behringer's book value was $80,000 or $800,000 times 10%. So they paid above book value, which is very common in buying shares. Book value doesn't capture everything. So there must have been a reason. If you can attribute it to a specific asset, which they attribute it to a copyright, you would value it. The extra $12,000 was because of a copyright that's to last 16 years. Therefore, if they were accounting for this as the equity method, they would have $750 annual amortization for the value they attributed to the copyright that wasn't recorded on Behringer's books. The second purchase of 20% interest was for $210,000. At the point, January 2012, that this purchase occurred, the book value is now bigger. The book value is bigger by $100,000 because of $180,000 in income less $80,000 in dividend. So they paid an extra $30,000 above book value. Again, they attribute this excess to the copyright, which now has only 15 years left. And if we're using the equity method, there will be annual amortization associated with the excess purchase price over book value of $2,000 a year for 2012. If the equity income method were used initially from 2011 before it became an equity method purchase, we would have reported $18,000 in our share of their net income, so $18,000 times 10% of earnings, less amortization on the first purchase above book value of $750,000. Equity income in 2011 would have been $17,250. In 2012, the basic equity income accrual, we bought the new shares on January 1st, now we own 30%. 30% earnings of $210,000 would be $63,000. We have two sets of amortization, one from the excess we paid for the first purchase of 10%, the second, for the second lot, the other 20% we purchased of $2,000. So had we always used the equity method, we would have reported $17,250 in net income in 2011, $60,250 in net income in 2012. Remember, in 2012, we own much more, 30% of the share. Part B asks us, what if we sold the entire investment on January 1st, 2014 for $400,000? We would have to see what the book value of the investment would be after 2011, 2012, 2013 earnings and dividends, earnings and dividends affect the investment. Also, 3 years of excess amortization. Compare it to the amount we sold it for. So we would have sold it for 400,000. So let's see. The first purchase price was 92,000. From the prior part, we said that when we start accounting for it on the equity income basis, we will do it retroactively so that we would have had 17,250 in equity income, 10% of income less excess amortization. "10% of dividends reduce our investment," so dividends reduce investment. In 2012, we also calculated 30% of reported net income less the excess amortization associated with both the 10% and the other 20% purchase. Subtract 30% of the declared dividends. Dividends reduce the investment. We recognize the investment goes up when they report earnings, less any excess amortization. Dividends are a reduction of investment, a return of capital. Finally, in 2013, we would have amortization of the first purchase, $750 a year, the second purchase, $2,000, and 30% of 2013 net income. 2013 net income, which is given toward the bottom of the text of the problem, was $230,000. 2013 dividends, $100,000. We own 30%. So altogether, the investment in Behringer, $377,750. Given that we sell it for $400,000, we would have a gain on sale of investment of $22,250. Okay, so how can we make this problem more realistic and harder? Well, how we would do that is to not only assume that the purchase of Behringer occurred with two smaller purchases, one 10%, one 20%, both above book value, both with different amortization calculations, but we can also assume, as often happens when one company acquires an equity stake in another, that there's intercompany transactions. So Andersen is selling inventory to Behringer. Remember, there's always going to be a price to Behringer and a cost to Andersen. The price to Behringer is Andersen's sales price. So altogether, what happened is there was a sale for the $50,000. The sales price to Behringer was $50,000. The cost to Andersen, $35,000. That would mean that there is a $15,000 gross profit. $15,000 divided by $50,000, the gross profit percentage of sales. At the end of the year, of the $50,000 sold to Behringer, $20,000 is left. So we have to defer the gross profit on the $50,000, on the $20,000 left of the $50,000 sale to Behringer. So $20,000 left in inventory. Each unit sold to Behringer had a 30% gross profit percentage. That's $6,000 in gross profit that Andersen sold to Behringer that hasn't been sold outside these two companies to a third party. Now, this is just a coincidence, but Andersen's ownership in Behringer is 30%. So there's $6,000 intercompany profit, and Andersen owns 30% of Behringer. So Andersen's portion of that $6,000 intercompany profit is $1,800. We would defer that in 2012, and we would recognize it when the 2012 inventory is sold into 2013. The next year, Andersen sells Behringer. Behringer pays $60,000 is the sales price. $33,000 is the cost to Andersen. Gross profit's $27,000. Gross profit over sales is 45%. So now at least the percentage Gross profit is different than the ownership percentage. Out of the 60,000 sold to Behringer, 40,000 is still on hand at Behringer at the year end. So 40,000 in intercompany inventory, 45% gross profit. The intercompany inventory has 18,000 left. 18,000 times 30% that Anderson owns of Behringer is 5,400. So in the year 2013, first, we take Anderson's percentage of Behringer's net income. Then deduct the amortization both on the first and second purchase of the 10% and 20% of Behringer. Then we deferred 2012 gross profits between the firms, but we assumed that anything that was deferred in 2012 was actually sold by Behringer in 2013. So we reverse the gross profit deferred in 2012 and assume that it was sold in 2013, but we defer the gross profit on our portion of intercompany sales, on Anderson's portion of intercompany sales, which is $5,400. There's $18,000 in gross profit left in remaining inventory in Behringer, but we only own 30%. So when you figure out how much to defer, you're looking at the remaining inventory times the gross profit percentage of sale times the percentage of Anderson's ownership. So there's three things that interact: the ending inventory remaining at Behringer, the gross profit as a percentage of sales sold to Behringer, and Anderson's ownership percentage. So that is how this problem would get a little trickier. And then you're done.